System riding to the core. Yeah. Reppin' Inner City Left.
This is the Inner City Left broadcast. Today is Thursday, August 13th. I'm Amin TMK alongside Amoja, a little tanky Sumler. Hello, Amoja. How are you? How was your Thursday? How was your week going? How was your August going?
It's a hot ass summer. But look, in America, I just get to complain about silly shit like the air conditioning, and that's a luxury. I guess that's what privilege is. That's my black privilege. I have the privilege of air conditioning.
That's black privilege.
1.0, man. Stay woke. 1.0.
The hottest July in human history. So here's the good part. It's going to be the coldest summer of the rest of your life. So focus on that more than the rest of it. Super El Nino is here. The collapse of the environment is here. That's how we do. That's just every day. I think it's just good. Now we can just talk a little bit about the doomerism that is the climate and go into sort of the rest of our geopolitics. So for all the environmentalists, we love you guys. We appreciate you guys. And this is our way of giving you a little bit of love because, yeah, heat, crazy, winters, crazy. Oh, Tornado Alley into your birthplace, my friend.
I read that, bro.
Yeah, Tornado Alley has moved into Chicago. Chicago boy over here. What do you think, man? Tornadoes
trying to
Chicago.
get me, man. Look, I've already moved, okay? So, it took too long. Winning.
Yeah, that's it. Charlie Sheen.
Man, Tiger Blood.
Himself, Tiger Blood.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now we really let
Crazy
that rock.
Times, man.
What a time to be alive. Indeed.
Oh.
So look, man, we haven't this is our first broadcast this week. So let's talk a little bit about something that has kind of been on for a little bit. And that is the war between Ansarallah in Yemen, also known as the Houthis, who are pretty much a war was declared upon them by the Saudis. And this is restarting the war between the Saudi Arabians and Ansarallah in Yemen. So that happened 3 years ago. There was an armistice or something. I can't remember. Maybe you can tell us more about that. But that stopped. Now things have restarted. So lots of attacks have been happening. This is just yesterday. Heavy rocket and artillery fire on Saudi proxy military positions in Yemen. So now you see Ansarallah doing what Iran does. They're hitting proxy targets. Yemen's Ansarallah-led forces are concentrating heavy fire on the Saudi-backed fighter positioning in Marab. And as you can see, for podcast listeners, not much going on here, but you see those little lights in the sky. Yeah, that's rockets. That's artillery. And that is landing in other parts of Yemen controlled by the Saudis. Can you talk to us a little bit about kind of the current situation in Yemen and how, what targets they're hitting and what you know about this war that stopped and is now on again?
So in many ways, this had been a lingering conflict, right? You have to remember that there's an ongoing civil war in Yemen, that there had been sanctions on Yemen for quite some time, going all the way back to, I believe, the Obama years. Certainly, Trump won, so for quite some time. And the important thing to remember there is it's a factional war between two sides. Ansarallah and literally Al-Qaeda, right? Guess which side the Americans are blockading. You can't make this shit up.
It's not Al-Qaeda.
Yeah. The other side is being, back and forth. There's sometimes they're funded by UAE. Sometimes the factions are funded by Saudi Arabia. This tends to be a point of contention between UAE and Saudi Arabia because Saudi Arabia wants to kind of be the big bro. They're the ones that handle, the geopolitical things on the peninsula. But UAE has lots of money and they have their own agendas. And so, it's tough, right? Like any type of a ceasefire would require really everyone on the board to sit down and talk about what is happening covertly as well as what is happening on the ground, So with that background, you have to understand it's never off. It's like an Israeli ceasefire. There's pauses, you know what I'm saying? And every now and again, there are these big, great treacheries. So for a while, it had kind of died back, and it had just kind of been like everyone conceded that Ansar Allah would control, the Red Sea opening. Unfortunately, all of this changed at the funeral of the last Ayatollah. Remember, we talked about it on the channel, how all of the different Arab and Muslim leaders in the region had come to pay their respects. Ansar Allah came, and on the way back, the Saudis tried to fire. Well, they didn't try. They fired on the airport in Sana'a. And it was widely assumed this was an assassination attempt. It missed, and that pretty much it was on. Once you take a shot at someone, they tend to remember it, and if they can do something about it, they tend to do something about it. Ansar Allah did something about it. And so they immediately began retaliation and strikes into Saudi Arabia. They've been, I don't want to say fed information because that's it could undermine their own intelligence gathering operations. Let's care to say the Ansar Allah movement was made aware of a troop. You have to aggregate troops before you can do any type of big land battle. You see this happen in Ukraine with the with Ukrainians and the Russians often before a big, what they call a big arrow movement, right? Lots of forces go in. You have to accrue those forces. Ansar Allah saw a big troop amassment happening on their borders, and they preemptively hit them all with mortar fires, with rocket fires. It was supposed to be a huge loss of mercenary life, and it was quite embarrassing. One of the interesting things was this happened on the very day that the Arabians had announced kind of a tripartite de facto military alliance with Turkey and with Pakistan. And see, now this is a big deal because on paper, this is something that anyone should have to fear. Like, even though the Saudi Arabian army is not a very powerful army, like, global firepower rates them at 25th, the 24th most powerful out of 145 of the nations considered in their annual review. They have a power index of what is rated as like 0.44, right? And in them, right, in the way that they rate, a 0.00 is considered a perfect army. So it's not a huge army, right, but it's quite competent. But when you compare that with Pakistan in the same thing is ranked 14th, the 14th strongest army in the world. These are things you don't think about when you think about Pakistan. They have a force of over 300,000 assembled soldiers. Their rating is 0.26. Okay. But I think the most intimidating of all these forces is the Turkish military. The Turkish military is ranked 9 out of 145. They are rated 0.19. And this is a standing force of more than 500,000 soldiers. So again, everyone thinks that this alliance is set to threaten Israel, but realistically, it's set to be a Sunni bloc, right? A Sunni NATO military bloc. You can't even say Arab, right? Because the Pakistanis are not of Arab derivation, nor are the Turkish. The thing that they have in common is they are Sunni militaries. Sunni Muslim militaries. But as it relates to Ansar Allah, they just don't care. It's like, what are you going to do? Invade? Are you going to do better than the Americans did? Right? So it creates a lack of fear, right, as it relates to them. And Ansar Allah is able to move in ways that Iran would find more challenging. Like Iran certainly cannot be engaged in a full-fledged military conflict with Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Turkey. Never mind the fact that Turkey becomes a tripwire because Turkey is a NATO force. So it allows irregular militaries like Ansar Allah to have more freedom than conventional militaries. And so the Iranians are able to essentially prepare for what they assume is going to be an invasion in some form or another and marshal their strength, while Ansar Allah has the freedom really to move in a way whereas they aren't as threatened. Because again, invading, the Americans tried to beat the Ansar Allah forces and had lack of success, and they're just betting that they just don't see anything different changing.
Let's talk a little bit about this, because I think this type of stuff is also really important in terms of like the appetite for the United States to be involved in, this regional war. We've been hearing a lot about the weapon shortages and things like this. But I want to talk about this. Pentagon confirms 3 U.S. strikes in Yemen killed over 150 civilians in 2025. Newly released Pentagon report confirms U.S. military operations killed 153 innocent civilians in 2025, with just 3 airstrikes in Yemen accounting for all confirmed deaths. So, the United States is still bombing Yemen. They're still active there as well. And it's important to remember that the United States is a country that will kill civilians. So again, this is the type of things that we see between the United States, the West, and the differences between the global South. They are not interested in hitting schoolgirls. They're not interested in hitting civilians. They're interested in hitting infrastructure, energy infrastructure, military targets, and this is one of the big reasons why a great deal of the world identifies with Iran. Through all the propaganda, through all the things being done, they still identify with Ansar Allah. They still they see how the United States, Israel, and the West use intimidation to try to get you to stop. No. Oh, they're hitting civilians. We have to stop. Remember, they thought that was going to happen in Iran. That was the whole point of hitting the group of schoolgirls, and that was to demoralize them. And this is what's happening in Yemen. But unfortunately, they've already gone through this. They already experienced the worst famine in 20 years in Yemen, and still experiencing a famine due to this military aggression. And the United States, again, right there to support the Saudis in this, unjust war that's really for Israel. It's really to keep them out of the Red Sea, which is what Ansar Allah is really good at, keeping ships out of the Red Sea that they don't want there. Any thoughts on that before we kind of pivot, man? You're muted, but that's cool. Still look good, man.
I would argue, again, to remember that these also serve American foreign policy interests. It's always too easy just to say this serves Israel's interest, because Israel does not have the firepower, the manpower. It doesn't have the economic strength to impact this type of change, on this level. It's only the largesse of the Americans. And you have to consider that this serves the American empire's interest, whatever those may be. Sometimes that interest is just simply domination. You have to consider that. I do want to follow up with the numbers that you said, because while the Pentagon is admitting to 153 civilians killed and 243 injured, the Yemen Data Project says 238, including 24 children were killed, 467 civilians were injured. There was a wonderful article about this by Dave DeCamp at antiwar.com. Again, a wonderful resource for people that want just kind of like a quick breakdown of things that are happening around the world, right? But yeah, I thought it was quite a thing for the Pentagon to out and out admit this. And yet, even in spite of that loss of life, there was no degradation in mission, right? Like, they killed all those people, and yet their military objectives were not achieved. Like, people think that murder is the agenda, and sometimes it is, right? But really what you have are strategic and tactical goals, right? And as it comes to militaries, loss of life is literally so lowly considered as like an ancillary, right? Like collateral damage, right? So to the military, that's collateral damage, but that was never the objective in and of itself. The objectives were not met. And so it's unlikely that anyone else will be able to change the calculus in that. Funny little postscript on that, though. When we're talking about this alliance between Pakistan, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia, the scuttlebutt is there was a reach out to Egypt to see if they would also be interested, because again, on paper, Egypt is an extremely large, capable military. And yet there was a lack of consensus amongst the three nations as to whether or not they could trust Egypt, in such an alliance. And that in and of itself says a whole lot about like the state of where we are. When you consider, the pan-Arab unity of the 50s and 60s to this moment where we are now, where even all of like the little trader nations are like, I think they sold out a little bit too much. We can't trust them. They might sell us out. Jordan was not invited. Syria was not invited. The UAE, the Emirates, none of those militaries were invited. This is a very specific type of military state that they want. And, again, on paper, it is formidable, but paper doesn't win wars.
This is what they want for Russia, too. They want to break it down into little factions and keep everybody fighting. It is what they want to see. And a united, Arab world is probably a long ways away at this point. Like you said, let's pivot a little bit because I think it's important. We've been talking about this for a while now, and I think it's, again, important to acknowledge that Venezuela has turned. They have turned to the United States and they turned to Israel. This is from Venezuela Analysis. Venezuelan foreign minister hosts chief rabbi to discuss diplomatic normalization with Israel. Rodriguez reapproachment with Tel Aviv, Delcy Rodriguez, marks a significant break with Hugo Chavez and Nicolas Maduro's unwavering commitment to Palestinian liberation. Let me remind you, during the last Venezuelan elections, the elections that were certified by the Venezuelan Supreme Court, if you remember, those exact elections, when the right-wing government, when they decided to leave the polls, their candidate said, "We support and stand with Israel." That's what he said when he left the polls. When Nicolas Maduro left the polls, he said, "Free Palestine." All right. So that's all you need to know. Now that Nicolas Maduro is gone, Delcy Rodriguez is here. That's supposed to be the vice president, who was also elected in that same election. That was supposed to be a fraudulent election, even though Venezuelan Supreme Court said that it was, in fact, certified. You talk about former President Jimmy Carter talking about Venezuela's free and fair elections. Now we're seeing their descent into Zionism, as it looks like to me, and probably to you as well. Delcy Rodriguez is now a puppet of the West. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those things where identitarianism often gets people into trouble. You know, it's not for me to talk about other demographics and need to like turn that lens inward. But for those of y'all that was out there, you know, like, you don't understand what's going on. You just want to attack Delcy. You know, this is the way that the woman is going to lead. It's going to be a little bit different. And like, there were a lot of leftist channels out there, especially Latina centered leftist organizations that really came for a lot of people that simply try to state what seems to be quite obvious now. And it's important to say, this isn't just something that happened under Nicolas Maduro. It was January 14, 2009, that Hugo Chavez cut off Venezuela's diplomatic relations with Israel, because he condemned the decades-long atrocities committed against the Palestinians. So if we've reinitialized those diplomatic niceties, is this because that the situation in Gaza has changed? Is there a two-state solution, a one state? Has Palestine been recognized as an autonomous nation by the entire United Nations? Do they have voting rights? Right? Have things gotten better or worse for the Palestinians since 2009? Right? If you think that things have gotten better, then you understand why Delcy made the decision that she did. There was no need to continue to, remove those relationships. But if you think that things have gotten worse, then I think you're forced to acknowledge at this point, a rat is a rat. It's hurtful, and it's a lot of rats. You can't just put this on Delcy. You have to put this on the entire Venezuelan establishment. And ironically, it was the Iranians that made fun of this, when they were, clapping back to the Americans. They're like, we are not the Venezuelans. You can't kidnap one of us and then everybody else goes off and gets scared. Venezuela was very offended by that. But, a hit dog gonna holler. That's what they say in the South.
Yeah. And, if you take a look here, because, we've done a lot of podcasts. I don't know if people know, we're over 250 here. We might be close to 300. I really have to double check. I'm not sure. But we've been doing this a long time. And this is sort of what the map has been changing a little bit. Maybe Bolivia was in the red for a little bit. Venezuela, Colombia was in the red for a little bit. Brazil was in the blue for a little bit. But now we're seeing, for our podcast listeners, this is a map of the countries of South America. And you pretty much see the entire western and northern and southern parts of South America leaning towards America and Israel. We just talked about Venezuela. Colombia's elections just went right wing. Bolivia right now is experiencing what I would pretty much consider damn near a civil war. And we don't know the fate of Evo Morales. He has been, there is a standing order for his arrest. Right. But we don't know exactly what's happened to him at this point. We do believe he's being protected by indigenous communities. In a lot of ways, and this is what Sabby Sabs is saying in this tweet, she's saying Brazil is next. And I think we've seen sort of the ways that Brazil is, going to be moving possibly towards the right at the end of Lula's presidency, just like Colombia and obviously, and Bolivia. Of course, there's a great amount of CIA work being done here, a lot of that Monroe Doctrine. What is your thoughts about sort of South America and how this thing is going to play out over the next few years?
So the first thing I have to do is consistently credit the brilliance of the way that Marco Rubio's State Department has conducted its operations. I would push back and say that Brazil is also blue. Like, it's hard to think. Lula lacks the strength. He lacks the veracity. He lacks the vision to understand the magnitude of the threat that he is facing right now as a BRICS nation, okay, in South America. It doesn't matter that to him, this wasn't meant to be an affront to the Americans. The Americans see BRICS as an affront. Anything that exists outside their economic command, they're going to be threatened by, because economics are a tool of war, and you have no further to go than to look at Venezuela to see how beautifully you can use sanctions to cripple an entire nation without ever firing a shot, to the point whereas when you finally send in your special forces, you can do whatever you need to do. If Lula had truly been the visionary that his nation needed, the South American needed, right? Understanding that if we're going to talk about regional hegemons, as the Americans are the regional hegemons, the Americans are technically the global hegemons, but they're certainly the regional hegemons of North America. It was for Brazil to be the regional hegemon of South America. The way that Iran is the regional hegemon of the Middle East, the way that China is the regional right? This was their area. And they conceded this because they didn't want to appear offensive to the United States. But simply signing up for BRICS already put their entire nation, I think, straight in the crosshairs. And if he'd had that vision to understand now is the moment to ally, not just with Petro, but also Chavez and all of the Chavista organizations, right, in Venezuela, because we've lost a lot. We've lost not just Venezuela, we've lost Colombia and an outright corrupt, hacked election. Same thing in Peru. It's important to understand that Peru had huge economic dealings with China, and now pretty much all of that is going to be up in the air. The first thing that the Colombian president did was he came in and he said, we're going to overturn all this Belt and Road, initiatives that we were going to do, right? And again, this is China building infrastructure projects in your country, right? This is helping your country vitalize and create infrastructure that will help every single person, because all of nation building begins with infrastructure. Logistics is the heart of everything, right? And when you're talking about even if you wanted to only resource extract, right? Having those logistics trains makes everything so much better. Like the first start of building important nation building projects, things that will affect the GDP on a national level, it all starts with infrastructure. And this was technology that Colombia was getting at dirt prices from the Chinese. And Peru was building the single largest port in the entire South America, right? All of these things are in question. This is why we say, again, it's foolish to not see these as stages of World War III. Right? It's not hyperbolic. It's not doom scrolling. It's not overselling this. America is choosing to assert its dominance over the entirety of the Americas because they feel like these are going to be the lands that are their last safe piggy bank for resource extraction in a world that becomes more and more isolated and militaristic in ways that the Americans can't control as easily as they used to. There's no one that 20 years ago would have thought that Iran would fight the Americans to a draw. The Iraqis didn't.
The game has changed, man. And we've been discussing this for a long time, that the U.S. military is not and it hasn't been. It just hasn't been. Vietnam is at this point 50 years ago. Like, the United States just can't do what it wants. And the idea that the United States military is just so powerful and it's so good that it just can't be stopped or it can't be defeated anywhere else in the world is just, decades and decades of propaganda, and you have to work your way out of it. And we're going to a multipolar world, not a world in where the United States and the Western world can decide how other countries move. And this is another one of those moments. We saw it. We're seeing it happen right now all over the world. We're seeing it happen in the Sahel right now. We're seeing it happen, obviously, in Russia. The rest of the global South is taking a step away best they can from the West. And that is just exacerbated when you see Iran being able to repel these strikes. And if you listen to the news, possibly getting some concessions here soon. We'll see how that goes. Who knows? But we'll keep everyone up to date. And I think that's it. I think there's anything else you wanted to jump in and say.
I mean, just to bookend your point, military summary interviewed an Iranian general, and he was quoted as saying, even if this war lasts for years, until the last day, Iran's rockets will be launched. If there comes a day when there are no more missiles, then that day will be even more dangerous for America. And essentially, the implication is not even about nuclear weapons. It's about understanding that American power has been distributed in such a way that you can hurt American corporate interests without ever even having to attack the American homeland. And that in and of itself should really be an indicator of how vast and how expansive the American empire is. There we are. And this standoff is not without consequences. This is not just some battle between the Iranians and the Americans. This lack of oil, this tightening of all of the what do you trade? The commodities, the freezing of the commodity markets. This is attacking the yen. Again, we're going to come back
and the yen is in trouble.
The yen is in trouble.
Big trouble.
The Americans sold $90 billion worth of euros so that they could buy $90 billion worth of yen. And then Scott Bessent threatened everyone not to short sell the yen right now and not to short sell the American treasury notes, right? And that still has not saved the yen. The yen is still in huge trouble. Japan is meant to be the preeminent American colony, Israel notwithstanding, right? To show what happens if you choose the benevolent path of allowing the Americans to shape your civilization. Look at what can happen for you. You can be as great as Japan. And Japan is about to crash economically.
Yeah. And they want, and any type of, attack on China looks like Japan is going to be a part of it. And if reading the tea leaves, like a lot of people read the tea leaves, people saying maybe an attack on China could be happening soon. We really don't know, but Japan will certainly be there. And, to your point, when you are a friend of the West, bad things can happen. It's dangerous to be an enemy of America, but it's even more dangerous to be a friend. Let's give a shout out to our podcast listeners. We're available everywhere you find podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Rate us. I see those ratings, man, and I see the comments, and they're really nice. And it always just makes us feel better when, some good comments there. And also it shows people that where people are engaging with the broadcast. And we know that this information is important. We know that this information is important. So rate us. And patreon.com/innercityleft. Shout out to our patrons. Y'all are the real heroes. We love you. Like cooked food. Innercityleft.com. Merch available, open now. Link in the bio. Amin TMK everywhere you find music. Lil Tanky everywhere you find music. Fables, Foibles, and Other American Sins. As you can see behind me right here, Amoja's Book of Poetry also available. Support us if you can. Like, subscribe. Leave your stars in the comments if you made it this far. And I think that's it. Tanky, final thoughts. What did we miss? Tidbits.
Man, I mean, it's just important to, not in passing, the Russian Navy has responded to the acts of the taking the shadow fleets. And now Putin has directly said that there will be tit for tats. And so he's reallocating the Russian Navy over to where its eastern borders are. Looks like it's possible that there could be confrontations with American or European merchant vessels in the waters where NATO ships are the least. And so we're in, a very dangerous standoff place. This has not happened yet, but he has stated that, enough is enough. And we'll see if he's serious or if he's playing. Maybe Putin's playing. He's probably playing. Putin's playing.
Yeah, when he's in the military outfit, that's a joke. It's funny times. So I would assume that fun times will be on the way as silly Putin gets up there in his military garbs. And we know Kyiv's been getting rocked really bad. So yeah, good tidbits, good extras. We'll be here to cover it. For Amoja, Lil Tanky Summer, I'm Amin TMK. This is the Inner City Left broadcast. Peace.
System riding to the core. Yeah. Reppin' Inner City Left.